So Sue, you're dual qualified as a solicitor and a family mediator here at EMG. Tell me a little bit more kind of what you do and what that role involves.
Well, the two roles are very different. As a solicitor, I have one client, and as a mediator, I have two clients, so I get to see both sides of the case or the coin, so to speak. So it's a very, very different role. And as a mediator, I'm not allowed to give advice.
Right.
I'm only allowed to give legal information, which is quite a broad description for information that you can give to a client, but it's got to stop short of actual legal advice.
So in terms of kind of mediation, about family mediation, can you describe a bit more what that's like, actually being in that room in some cases?
Well, it can be different things for different people. So you can have somebody who comes to mediation because they simply want to go to court, and you actually have to come to mediation or an initial meeting called a MIAM before you go to court to get a mediation certificate. So some people just simply want to come and get their mediation certificate, and they're not actually interested in doing mediation.
And actually doing the mediation,
Some people don't really know what mediation's about, and a lot of people don't know what mediation's about. And my job is to explain to them what mediation's about, and also for them to tell me their story about why they've come to mediation. And I see each party individually for a MIAM, which is the initial meeting. And once I've seen both of them, I will then decide whether I think mediation for a joint meeting is suitable. And then we then proceed down the joint mediation route. Really it's a case of them being able to tell their story in the MIAM and have somebody listen to them, because quite often their ex-partner hasn't been listening to them and they get frustrated.
Yeah, and a chance to sort of have that voice, because I suppose we've talked a little bit about family mediation. Is it always families that, I suppose, two people in a family, or, could it be between a grandparent and,
Yes.
could be a mix? Yeah, so it's not always, parent and parent.
No, it can be grandparents, and also you can choose how you hold the mediation.
Okay.
So you can do it as a shuttle mediation where parties don't really want to be in the same room. You can do it whereby the mediator shuttles between the two of them and carries the offers backwards and forwards, or they can be in the same room, or you can do a mixture of the both. Either you start off in the same room and things get a little bit difficult, they can go into separate rooms, or you can start off in separate rooms, and if things are going well, you can bring them together in the same room.
Together, yeah. And in terms of time spans, I imagine there's no average, it depends on case by case. But if someone's thinking about, we're going to go into mediation, what might their expectations be about kind of how long the sessions might be, how frequent, what is expected of them? Do they need to bring anything?
In relation to children mediation, those can be quicker, because there are rarely, if anything, any documents to be discussed.
Right.
Sometimes the parties want to put together a parenting plan, so that would really be the only document that would be involved for them to discuss in a child mediation. Because children mediation can be quite emotional, or very emotional, the meetings aren't normally longer than an hour and a half, because by the end of it, people are pretty, have the emotions they've had enough. Financial mediations can take longer because they need all their documentation, they need all their bank statements and their wage slips and all that sort of stuff. Sometimes that can take a long time to gather, because pensions can traditionally take an awful long time to get the information for. And those meetings tend to be, maybe 2 hours long.
Right.
So most children mediations, I would say 2 to 3 sessions.
Okay.
And it's really up to the parties how quickly they want them. Could be, somebody might want a little bit of a break because they're finding it too tough, so they might have a couple of weeks break.
Yeah.
Sometimes they might say, no, we want to do it, next week, can we have an appointment next week?
Yeah.
So it could be a matter of weeks. In financial matters, they do tend to be a bit more drawn out because of the documentation and the questions that might arise, and so if somebody asks a question of the other person, they might have to go and get other bank statements, or they might have to get valuations. So the financial ones do tend to be, I would say, probably months rather than weeks in terms of how long they take.
And in terms of kind of where these are held, so obviously thinking about the past year and a half, you guys have recently launched an online mediation service at EMG. I bet that has been a lifesaver, not just for the pandemic.
Yeah.
But in terms of, you know, if people don't want to be in the same room, or even for you shuttling between rooms, I bet it's a lot easier to shuttle between virtual rooms.
It is. It is. Clients obviously can do it from where they want to. And if they are in the same home, we often say to them, even though you can be in separate virtual rooms, we would prefer them actually not to be in the same place.
Yeah. Obvious reasons.
So we do try and ask them if they could possibly be, you know, in separate places. But yes, it has worked really, really well. It's been a baptism of fire for me, having to learn, you know, how to go in between rooms, set up breakout rooms.
Make sure everybody's got the invitation they need at the right time.
And I think everybody's been learning, lawyers and mediators alike, and clients as well, having to, you know, get used to this online life for professional appointments where you would always expect to go into somebody's office.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
I suppose there's that sort of formal, like we're going to the solicitors, you know, we're in that mindset, whereas, you know, just logging into Zoom. I suppose when we're thinking about divorces and online mediation, because, you know, divorces can be tricky, I bet the mute button comes in very handy in some cases.
I haven't actually ever had to use I haven't actually had to use the mute button. Quite often clients find it difficult to speak to each other, and what they do is they tend to speak to you. So they speak to the mediator, giving the message to the other person. It's quite triangular. And it's only after they've warmed up a bit that they can start communicating with each other. And especially in a divorce, I bet that you know, things. Yeah. I think some divorces can be amicable and fairly straightforward, but from your professional opinion, what would you say about, you know, those tricky divorces? And, you know, have you got any advice you would share, you know, to me about like mediating in those really difficult circumstances? A lot of the problems, whether you're talking about legal situations or in a mediation session, amount to people not listening to each other. It's not. It is difficult because properly listening to people is difficult, because what we're actually, when we think we're listening, we're not. What they're actually doing is thinking of a really clever response to what the other person's saying, or they actually are so convinced that they know what the other person's saying that they switch off because they've heard it all before. So it's the trying to get people to understand and to really listen, and everybody finds that really difficult to do. And often, not all the time, but often what you'll find is that they're actually agreeing and they don't know they're agreeing because they're so used to hearing each other not agree that they're conditioned to expect it to be a negative answer. And they're quite often pleasantly surprised that they're actually agreeing. And when you actually say to them, do you realise you're both agreeing? No, we're not. Yes, you are. You've just said this, and he's said this. Oh, really? And that often is enough to cut through the ice for them to then start talking properly to each other and listening and actually getting to the point where they need to be.
And I suppose having that, so you and is that outside perspective, you know, that like you're a sounding board, I suppose, for some people. But I guess, what would you say would be a successful outcome for mediation?
It depends, and I say it depends not because I'm trying to avoid the question, but because sometimes a mediation can seem to have failed because they haven't reached an agreement. But actually what it has been is a catalyst. They've actually picked up snippets from the other person, and they've actually had time to let that sink in time rather than in the kind of heat of the moment. And often they will go on to reach an agreement. So there's never a failed mediation. It's not right at that point in time. So we always say to people, mediation isn't suitable at the present time. We don't say mediation's failed.
Yeah.
And we always invite people back if they ever want to come back. And sometimes courts will ask them to come back to mediation if they go to court and the courts say, look, this is really a dispute that you need to be mediating and not one where a judge needs to be involved. Yeah. And they can come back. Sometimes people have been in court proceedings for years and they realise actually court is giving them absolutely nothing. And so they decide we've got to do something and they actually come to mediation. So an outcome is different things for, you know, for different people. For some people, it's a parenting agreement. For some people, it's just simply enough to actually agree in the mediation sessions and they're able to go away and they've sorted it. Other people, it's getting an order agreed and it going into court and being sealed so that they've actually got a court order to work from. So it really depends on what the parties actually want and how the mediation is helping them at that particular time.
Yeah, and I guess about managing people's expectations, I suppose it must be difficult because maybe one side thinks, I know how this is going to go and this is how I want it to go. Yeah. And because you can only give sort of legal, you know, observations really. Yeah. You can't, and of course you couldn't be on anyone's side. But I think it's important for, when you think of mediation, you always think about solving something or fixing something, and actually what you just said there about that, you know, maybe it's just not the right time.
Yeah.
That's equally as important, I think.
Yeah. But it's also up to them to solve the problems. It's not up to the mediator.
Yeah, yes.
And quite often people don't know how to be responsible for their own decisions. It is a really, really difficult thing to do. Yes. And making their own decisions can sometimes be very empowering, but also very scary. Because if you've got a lawyer, your lawyer is making your decisions.
And there's that sort of natural trust, I suppose, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. So it can be quite tricky because they're actually there on their own, making their own decisions. But you always say, go and take legal advice if you're at all unsure. So it's not as if they're sort of just in limbo and they're, you know, they're without an oar. Yeah. They can actually go once they've had these discussions and speak to their lawyers, and they can then come back to mediation so they can understand what the legal concepts might be, what the legal advice might be, to come back in and continue their conversations and discussions with each other.
Mm-hmm. And then just having that space to think and like I say, it can be empowering, or even I suppose empowering that this isn't the right time.
Yeah, but also I would also say that the lawyer has to be the right lawyer. Yeah. So lawyers who support family mediation give their clients options and ranges of advice. You know, it might be this, it might be that, what's important to you, you know, rather than saying you need to settle for this. And so if you're going for legal advice in mediation, it's important that you actually give yourself flexibility to discuss and negotiate in mediation rather than coming in with a fixed position, because it's not going to help you and it's not going to help you reach an agreement with the other person.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
No problem.